Hello there, welcome to Penpositive. This is Vinod Narayan, and today in this episode, I've got something different. The reason is I'm both recording it on video and I'm going to take the audio and have it available on my podcast, Penpositive Outclass. And so the format in which the podcast used to be there, that's going to change because I'm going to talk about only one single topic in this particular episode. And that's going to be about Clubhouse. So I've been with Clubhouse probably since February of this year, but something really changed over the past 1 week. And I wanted to share that experience and how I look at Clubhouse and what are probably my concerns and also my interests in using or limiting Clubhouse, whatever that is. But I want to share that thoughts with you and how I would potentially be using it in the future. So I've got a few pointers. If you don't want to see the video and you want to listen to the podcast, head over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast, and search for Penpositive Outclass and you can listen to this episode there. I'll also put a link to the Spotify on the show notes over here. On the description if you're watching this on YouTube. So first thing is that how did I get to Clubhouse? And why that question is relevant is because initially when Clubhouse came, it was not available to everyone. It was a very exclusive club and you had to be invited by someone and you didn't have a lot of invitation. So it was exclusive. I live in Silicon Valley, but for me, the invitation came from my own state in India, Kerala. So a friend of mine in Kerala called me one day, sent me a message on WhatsApp and asked, have you heard of Clubhouse? And I said, no, I have not heard. And he said, this thing would be interesting to you. Since you do podcasts, you create content, Clubhouse should be interesting to you. And he said, can I nominate you? I said, definitely. And I really thank him for doing that. So I get into Clubhouse. Now what? So I go to Clubhouse, I kind of figure out what the whole thing is. It's a social media, it's about audio. And it was only a few days before that, I think I discovered the audio option in Twitter where I could do a tweet as a voice. I've always been trying to see what is the best way that I could use audio in a social media context. And before that, there was a group that I had, and I still have on Telegram, where we used to put voice clips on Telegram and we used to kind of communicate over audio on Telegram. And during my walks, what I would do is that I would on the audio on Telegram and this would go one after the other. And this was about a year back. No, this was about 2 years back. And I thought this is pretty interesting, You can have this audio just like how you listen to podcasts. You can have this different people talking about an issue and that's fun. But then after some time it was too much of effort and because all the people in the group were in India and by the time I wake up there were about 1,000 messages and I couldn't keep track of what was happening. So kind of left it. So when Clubhouse came, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Yes, this is exactly how I used to use Telegram a year and a half ago. And then I got connected with a few people that I knew. There were a few people who were there on Telegram. I went to rooms. And probably, I think I even made a podcast on February 21st saying, what is this Clubhouse? And just introducing Clubhouse and what I felt about it. And then over time, I stopped using it. So this was in February. I stopped using Clubhouse and I kind of forgot about it. I even forgot that there was a app available on my phone, Clubhouse. I never went into it. And then somewhere, I think March, April, I would have probably looked into it and I had about 250 followers. And then about a week back, so I knew Android release is going to come, and after Android release comes, there's going to be a lot of people who can use Clubhouse. Because when I spoke to people, they said that it's only available in iOS, it's not available in Android. Fine, go ahead. Then 1 week back, I think precisely, I guess Thursday, I think last week of May probably, I start getting these notifications. I start getting these notifications one after the other. And then I go into Clubhouse and I look from 250 followers that has gone up to 2,500 followers. Now, I do have a substantial number of people following me on my Malayalam channels, be that on my Facebook page or my YouTube. On Facebook, there's about 300,000 and on YouTube, there's about 100,000. Not huge, but considerable number of people. And that's when I realized that Android release has happened and a lot of people who use Android have started having this. But what I could feel is the Malayali effect, I would call. So we are from a state called Kerala in India, and we speak this language, Malayalam, and we call Malayalis. So for people who don't understand, because one of the things that I figured out is that at least people in Clubhouse now know what Kerala is and what Malayali is, because that's the kind of appreciation people have shown towards this particular app. And then from there on, within a week, I was having I was checking just before making this video, checking it was about 73,000 odd followers on Clubhouse. But that's a lot of people like that. I even saw someone who had about 260,000 followers who started the Clubhouse account only about a week back in Kerala. So I was thinking, why is it that people in Kerala, Malayalis, have so much, are so enthusiastic about Clubhouse? And that's what I was thinking. Now, before I get further, I want to tell you why I use Clubhouse, and I put that details on my profile there. I have a certain social capital available, and that's a social capital that I got by creating content online, be it on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever that is. And none of those platforms I can dispense this social capital, or I cannot use this social capital so that others could be heard. Clubhouse for me gives me a platform where my social capital can be dispensed to those people whose experiences, whose voices should be heard. And that, I think, is something that I really love about Clubhouse. So that's why I am on Clubhouse. Now, what do I do on Clubhouse? So on Clubhouse, what I do is that I have two clubs, Penpositive Club, and I've got Pahayan Media, which is my Malayalam persona, and I have a club on that. So I do a daily room. I host a daily room, and I have different topics for every day. My 6:30, that is PST, 6:30 morning till 8 o'clock before I start work, I am on the club or on the room. So last few days I've been moderating it, and my daily schedule, walking and everything happens in the evening. So this week onwards, what I'm trying is that I'm going to open it up and make other people moderate and run the show, because it's not for me to talk, but it's for other people to, giving them a platform to talk. And since I've got this social capital, that social capital would get converted into listeners, and people could, there will be a set of people who would listen to what other people have to say. And I don't use that time for me to talk. I'm more interested in listening to. And while Clubhouse is a app for people to talk, I think for me it is more of an app for me to listen, to interact, to engage with other people. So it's just like the analogy I give is, it's just like me having the keys to the playground gate, and I would, in the morning at 6:15, 6:30, I would open the gate and leave it for whoever it is to go and play in the ground. The only thing I do is that I decide what game has to be played, whether it's going to be football or soccer or cricket or whatever the game is going to be. And then people can play. So which means I define the topic and I would like to hear other people to say their experiences and what they have, their opinions and their learnings of that topic. And we've been talking about entrepreneurship, we've been talking about career and work, we've been talking about social media and how that impacts us, we've been talking about life, society, culture, and even Q&As. The other day we spoke about World Environment Day and how people look at environment, what are measurable actions we take. And I'm amazed by the amount of knowledge and perspectives that people have. And I'm so happy that I could use my social capital in such a way that people could get an opportunity to talk. And this, I think, is what I'm going to do on Clubhouse. There's one more interesting thing that I do, how I bring Clubhouse and the podcast together. So when I listen to people talking in the morning, that makes me think. So evening, I would do a podcast and I do a daily podcast. So evening, I would do a 20-30 minute podcast on the topic that we discuss in the morning. So over the duration of the day, this whole listening process that I did during the morning, Clubhouse room, that thing allows me to kind of distill my thoughts into some kind of a structure that I convert into a podcast. I talk about that same issue. So I tell people this is, and in the Clubhouse room, I'll tell folks that this is not my time to talk. This is your time to talk. I'll listen. And what I have to say, I'll use the podcast. So that's how I've been last 1 week I've been using, and that's how I plan to use it in the future till I have to drive to office, which means that'll take away the commute time from my possible. I still can probably listen to podcasts, listen to Clubhouse while I drive as well. So let's see how that goes. Anyway, now that's how I look Clubhouse versus podcast. What is the current interest I have on Clubhouse, and why are people so much interested in Clubhouse? And I'm primarily looking at it from a Malayali perspective or Kerala perspective. Because in Kerala, I don't know about other places, but there are rooms I've been there and I've spoken to, not rooms that I've started. The rooms that I start typically have about 400 to a maximum of probably 800, 900 people attending, on and off. It depends on when it is available, and sometimes people are there, sometimes people are not there. And the topics are entrepreneurship and work, career. So it again depends on what is the mood of the person to listen to at that point of time. But there are podcasts about religion, about politics, and about all other things, current affairs and everything. There was a podcast, there was a club, and I keep confusing with Clubhouse and podcast once in a while. But what I mean to say is that there are some rooms where you would potentially have about 8,500 people listening to a few people talking. And at least in my experience from what's happening in Kerala, most of these conversations are either on movies, but not even movies. I think the religion and the discussions regarding religion or against religion and that arguments and narratives are where you get a lot of people. And I think everyone has a skin in the game when it is about religion. And probably for politics also, you're going to have some kind of, I think initially there was a political discourse on Clubhouse, and that was the time I saw first 2,500 people in one room. And then within a day or something, there was another room which had 5,000. Then you see 6,000. Then one of the room that I was there, 8,500. And I don't know, there was a limit for 5,000, and you could see Clubhouse kind of being unable to serve. And you would try to get into the room, and the room would say that room is full. A virtual room is full. You cannot enter. Please wait till someone drops out of it. And I'm thinking, why is that kind of an interest over there? Probably it's a lockdown period in Kerala. And over the past 1.5 years, a lot of us have lost that ability, have lost all our chances to talk, communicate with people in a very informal setting, or even in a formal setting. We've all been on Zoom and other places, but not like a coffee room chat is not there. We cannot listen to coffee room chats. We cannot have coffee room chats. And that whole thing just changed when Clubhouse was available. And to give you an idea of how these Malayali groups or rooms are, there are rooms on religion, politics, philosophy, movies, and there are even silly rooms with silly topics, maybe sarcastic, maybe funny, entertaining. People talk about anything. I mean, doesn't have to make a lot of sense. Just entertain, kill time. I mean, so you could see all those kind of people are being very innovative in the way they would talk in rooms. They would arrange rooms. There's obviously rooms which say that, okay, join this room and you'll get 10,000 followers. And I have absolutely no clue what you're going to do with 10,000 followers when you can't have 10,000 people in a room. At least that's my understanding. And what you're doing is live. So if I have 70,000 followers, and if usually that doesn't happen, because even if you have 100,000 followers on YouTube doesn't mean that every single video that you put will get 100,000 views. That's not how it works, and everyone knows that. So if by any chance half of that 35,000 people decide to listen to or log into the room that I've created, it won't work. At least I don't think it works right now. So number of followers, the only thing is that you would probably get some perks that people know you. People know that you've got so many followers, and so people think you're someone important. We obviously get an unearned credibility that is not really true when you have number of followers. But that's what social media is. People want to have a lot of followers, and these groups where you want to increase following, I follow you, you follow me kind of stuff, that started in Clubhouse as well. So I think lockdown has been one of the reasons why potentially a lot of people are encouraged or incentivized to use Clubhouse and spend a lot of time on it. It has this ability to interact, which I personally find very interesting, because over the past probably about 5 months, 6 months, my focus has been more into podcasts than videos. And one drawback with podcasts is it's very difficult to interact, because I'm doing it via Anchor, so you can put your voice messages via Anchor, but there's no way that I can communicate. It is not like YouTube or Facebook or Instagram where you put a comment and I can reply to the comment. None of those things work. So what I did in podcast, the only reason to create websites for the podcast. So for Penpositive Outclass, I've got a penpositiveoutclass.com website where I make a post for every podcast that I put, so that people could comment and I could have an engagement over there. That thing probably, now I can have this platform Clubhouse, where I can communicate, contact, speak to, interact with people who potentially listen to the podcast, and even interact with people who have not listened or heard about my podcast. And my podcast listenership has increased over the past 1 week, which is good. So Clubhouse as such doesn't exist in silo. It when you connect that with podcast and everything, I think it's a pretty powerful tool for you to start engaging and talking to people, and even listening to people who really matter, the people who have some opinions and experiences that they have to share. Stories. I think the world becomes a little more better place when people start sharing their stories, and I think that's a power that Clubhouse gives to us. Now, so connecting with people, interacting with people, it also, another thing that interests me is that it has less incentive for fake profiles and trolls. If you look, so there are trolls and there are fake profiles who would just get onto the stage and they would maybe say some bad words or just howl, and then someone has to kick them out of the room or out of the stage. Now, what is the incentive of a person to do that? Imagine that there's a room that is there for about 1 hour. And if I am a fake profile, I'm a troll, and I raise my hand, and if I have to just to howl and disturb the conversation, if I have to wait for 45 minutes, is it even worth it? It's not. So I think it's giving less incentive to people who are potentially fakes or trolls. One another aspect though is that when you have a lot of followers and you are known in one way or the other within the community, you cannot go to a room and be invisible and silent and listen to it. That's a negative I see. And I'll get to the concerns that I have. But the beauty of being live, talking to people, having people listen to me live or listen to us live, whoever is talking, I think that's a great power. So every day morning when I do this thing, there are people who are live available over there with whom I can communicate. I can listen to people who have their stories to tell. And I think that's very powerful. Because when we say that, okay, I'll listen to it at some point or the other, then I obviously would forget. But if I am there at that point of time, then I get to. And sometimes some reactions, they're instant and you cannot reproduce them. If you're there, you saw it or listened to it, you experienced it. Otherwise, it's not there. And especially during this COVID time when live shows and live performances have had a major hit, I think having that in Clubhouse is a great thing. Now, let's get into some of the concerns that I have. And concerns it's a time concern. It's very engaging and you have to always remain engaged. It's not like podcasting where it's more of sermonizing kind of stuff, but I don't have to react. I don't have to think about anything. I just can go with something. Here, I might get called, my name might get called and I might have to talk. So I have to, at least the room that I start, I have to be completely engaged. So 1.5 hours when I run a room, 1 hour or 1.5 hours that I run a room, I have to be engaged. And that is just like being engaged in a meeting. The meetings that you would have in office, it's just like being engaged in that. So I think that takes a lot of time. So you have to cut down the time that you use Clubhouse. Maybe you can listen into things, but even then you can't just be a passive listener, because some of the topics you would want to speak, you would raise your hand. So those things would happen. So I think our engagement level needed for Clubhouse is pretty high, which impacts the time that you would need to spend there. It can be addicting, or rather it is addicting. So we have to know what our consumption pattern is going to be and how we wish to consume content on Clubhouse. I think that's not a concern. That's something that we have to be aware of and work on that. Now, FOMO, Clubhouse FOMO. So Clubhouse FOMO, you can only be in one room. And if you see that there is a conversation happening in 2 rooms, so you go to one room, you talk, you say something, and then you leave the room. Then you want to know what's happening in that room where you spoke, but you also want to listen to another room. So there's a fear of missing out within Clubhouse that I experienced over the last 1 week. And we have normalized certain habits within us, especially in content consumption. I don't remember what is the time I have seen a live TV, and I don't watch a lot of sports, so that might be the reason. I don't have any incentive to watch something live. I'm okay to watch that later on. I'm okay with that. And that's how my consumption of content, my content consumption has been. So my question is, when that becomes like a normalized thing that we can store everything and watch it or listen to it whenever we want, this live thing kind of puts a limit to it. It creates a problem. Because you cannot at your own disposal consume the content. So one of the examples I would give is, like, I have a daily podcast and I have people listening to it on a daily basis when they walk, exercise, or go to office, or come back, or do drive, or whatever it is. But I know there are people who listen to my podcast in the morning that time. There are people who listen to podcast only during the evening time. There are also people who kind of binge listen to the podcast that I do every week. So they spend maybe a long drive every week and they would listen to the podcast. So they listen to podcasts at their convenience. And that, I think, is not going to be possible in Clubhouse unless the new features are going to come. So since storing something has become a norm of how we consume content, people are in between this thing. Live, yes, There's a sexiness with listening to something live. There's a convenience of listening something anytime. So between here, somewhere people are trying to figure out what is the best way they use Clubhouse, and that's how I look at it. What are the future features that I look forward for Clubhouse? And this is from my experience over the last 1 week. I've spent much, at least maybe 5 times more than what I spent on it last few months, because I think there was more people who came in, and only when you have your people that you know, and people who know you there, does a social media or any kind of such kind of a social networking tool becomes relevant to you. If none of the people that you know or know you are there in the network, that network is totally irrelevant for you. I think so. Opening up Android, and a lot of people in Kerala knowing that I am there, and they also having an access to use Clubhouse, I think that is where my interest in the entire app improved. And I really would love to know what is the analytics, that Malayali analytics or the Kerala analytics that has happened. What do they infer? The people who started, the founders of Clubhouse, what do they infer out of the analytics? How do they see the kind of rooms that are happening over there and kind of discussions that are happening? And I don't know if there are rooms that have this 8,000 plus listeners. Is that a regular thing? I think at least in Kerala that has become a regular thing to a great extent. Not 8,000, at least a lot of rooms have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. I think that will be an interesting analytics for people within Clubhouse to figure out what's happening. Now, one of the issues that I see when I use Clubhouse is, so we are on the stage, right? We are either moderators or we are speakers. So there are a lot of people who are listeners, either followed by the speakers or listeners whom none of the speakers are following. Now, they all might have an opinion on what is being said. There's no way that they can react to it. There is no way that they can say yes, no, right, wrong, fact check, or give a pointing or anything like that. So there's no way that they can interact. And I think having that feature would really be good. I don't know, maybe some pointing system. Maybe you start getting speaker scores when you engage. Just like when TED used to have this TED cred number or something. So I used to have a cred number. So when you comment and people upvote you, or people like or upvote you, that increases your cred number. And then you say that this person is he's got more credibility than other people when it comes to commenting. I think speaker credibility is something in some way that Clubhouse should bring in, and that is important, because just by having followers, like 73,000 followers that I have, it's not a small number, I agree. It's a platform that's pretty new, but that gives me an unearned credibility, a credibility that I don't think I've earned, to speak on all topics for that matter. But you get called to talk on all topics, and if you say that you don't want to be there, you would be looked down upon as, oh, what's his problem? I mean, we called him to the stage and he can't come, what's his problem? So that's a problem that I personally am facing on Clubhouse. Now, other than this interaction from the listeners in any way, this whole I think even leave quietly, I think it's a very good message that it passes. Like, if you are in a conversation and if you are on the stage and if you don't have anything to say, you don't have to tell people that you're leaving. You just have to leave quietly. But that's not always that good, in my opinion, because while you want to leave quietly, we are used to telling people that we are leaving. So that's how normally we work, right? So I'm in a meeting, and if I want to leave, I'll tell them that I have to leave, because there might be a person there waiting for his turn to talk, so that he would be able to ask a question to one of the speaker, who just leaves, who just vanishes, not anymore. So there, I think probably what you should have is some kind of a countdown maybe. Say that this person is going to leave in next 1 minute or 2 minutes, and then that countdown starts. It'll be interesting because when you look at it, you'll know some people have decided to leave in the next 1 or 2 minutes. So moderator knows, everyone knows, if you want to get that person to talk, if you want to listen to that person, you can use that time. So that kind of helps. The same way, you also need to have a counter which says that you've been on the stage for so long a time. And if you have not got an opportunity to talk, if you speak once, you kind of have your counter restarted. And I say this because a lot of people who can't really facilitate, and people will learn, maybe it's not a big issue, but I was just thinking about a few of the features, I think. And sometimes we think about features because it's so new to us, and we don't want to adjust to how the platform is. So we say, okay, let's have this feature, let's have another feature. But if you really look at whether that feature is something that people are going to use in the long term, then maybe not. But I just wanted to share that with you all. Now, how do I plan to use Clubhouse in the future? I think I'm going to use Clubhouse in connection with the podcast, more with the podcast rather than with my Facebook and YouTube activities. Just even before using for Clubhouse, pretty much during the last one week after the Android release, I think before that itself, I had cut short on the number of videos that I make, and I had made it about one video a week, one English video and one Malayalam video every week, and that's all I do. I used to do daily videos during the lockdown. So I've already kind of gone down on the number of videos that I make on Facebook, and my usage on Facebook and YouTube have already gone down, and focus has been on podcast. One another benefit, at least in the Kerala Malayali market, is that podcast has not really become popular. And this, with Clubhouse coming into picture, at least in my personal opinion, I am able to get a lot of people engaged into listening to podcasts. Not just my podcast, because I strongly believe that listening to podcasts is a great way to learn something. And everyone should listen to podcasts. At least 1.5 hours every day when I go for my walk, I listen to podcasts. And some of the podcasts are about 2 hours. And I think it is as good as reading a book, spending that time. Now, in the future, one of the problems that I have started facing is that I've got less time to read. Or when I read, I'm not very focused on reading, because at that time I have an option to just listen to on Clubhouse, should I do or not. So understanding my Clubhouse consumption pattern and deciding when I'm going to listen, when I'm going to host the room, and which are the rooms I'm going to talk. Should I only go to the talks where I am invited beforehand? Because that's also happening. There are people saying that, okay, we're going to host a talk on Clubhouse on this particular day. Why don't you come and talk? So those things are going to happen. Or should I just, whenever you get a free time, you just go over there and barge into any room and then talk? Is that what you want? I don't know. I think that won't work. So I have to put some real time when I would use podcast, and rest of the time, use Clubhouse, and rest of the time I don't use it. So that's probably how I'm going to use in the future. And then over a time, we will evolve into how this is going to be beneficial to me and the listeners and other people who have been consuming my content down the line. Now, what happens to the copycats? Now, you're going to have similar Clubhouse modeled features available in other social media, probably Instagram, Facebook, I don't know. Spotify seems they're going to come up with something. And I think when Spotify comes up with something that is very Clubhouse-like, I think having a podcast and me having my podcast over there, would that be a better choice? But then everyone of my podcasters should be listening the podcast on Spotify, not on Apple or on Google Podcast. But then Clubhouse, so I think Clubhouse will still have that relevance because the UI and how it is used, and it's pretty simple. And then once people start using it, they can easily say that I use this site for video, this site for reading, this site for audio. So I think in that case, Clubhouse still will have the relevance, is what I think. So that's a long video, but not a long podcast. I wanted to dedicate one video plus podcast, because there's going to be a podcast as well, and talk about Clubhouse. So my Clubhouse ID is at Vinod Narayan, and the Clubhouse, the English Clubhouse club that I have is Penpositive. Anyway, thanks for listening. I will see you all again next week, and listen to the podcast Penpositive Outclass. Be content, be pen positive, stay safe, and please be kind. Thank you.